Okay. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Nags Head Planning Board meeting, Tuesday, February 20th. The first order of business will be to approve our agenda for today.
Can I make a motion?
Please. We have a motion.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Great. Moving on from the agenda to public comment and audience response. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak to us today? Open speak. Okay, great. Nobody's here then, and we'll move on to the approval of the minutes from our January 16th meeting.
I move that we approve the minutes.
And I can make a second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes as submitted from January 16th. All in favor? Aye. No problems. Great. Moving on to item E then, our action items. And E1 is the discussion and consideration of text amendments to allow long-term rental of units within existing hotels and motels.
Good morning, everyone. As noted, we're here. This is going to be our third opportunity to talk about these text amendments that would ultimately result in existing hotel units constructed in hotels that were constructed prior to 1972 to allow them to convert these hotel units to long-term rentals. We've talked about this several times. You've got a staff report. I won't go over every little detail, but I will just run through the ordinance requirements. When we got into this, when we were talking about the need to require that we consider, at least at a minimum, a deed restriction for these units to require them to be long-term occupancy or tenancy. That meant that we had to have a definition for that. And so we have a proposed definition for long-term occupancy proposed. We have a definition for principal place of residence. We have the definition for qualified person and workforce or workforce housing unit. These definitions aren't exactly like they were proposed in the multifamily. They've, where the multifamily spoke to having it in a deed restriction as opposed to a lease restriction, where it talked about an HOA or a POA, things of that nature. I eliminated that language, but for the most part, the definitions are the same. And so then we get into the actual supplemental regulations for the long-term rental of hotel units. Note that a hotel operator may choose to seek a change of use, a special use permit for the conversion of the hotel units into long-term rentals. So as you know, special use permit, it's going to be that process where comes to the planning board for recommendation. It then is on consent agenda where we do the public hearing notifications and then public hearing the following month. So there's more scrutiny in the review for special use permit. This second condition, all units within the hotel development must be converted to long-term rental occupancy, and the occupancy within the structure shall not be split between short and long-term. That was something that we had talked about here at the board, that you wouldn't want to have, for instance, a hotel structure with this conversion where some units were short-term and other units were long-term, that the needs and desires of each of those types of tenants would be different. And so it might be better, if you were going to consider it, to just allow that the entire structure be long-term or short-term. So just to bring it up in your staff report, we did reach out to the other 4 hotels that could potentially take advantage of this use. Did not hear from Seahorse, but we did hear from Tar Heel and First Colony Inn. And Tar Heel had said if this ordinance were to be adopted, they would like to explore using it for long-term for the purpose of housing, I think they said, traveling nurses and other professionals. So this second condition here about how all the units within the development should be converted to long-term wouldn't work for what Tar Heel has noted that they would like to do. So I did just want to bring that to your attention. The third condition, long-term lease rental shall mean occupancy for a period of 90 consecutive days or more. That's part of our definitions as well. All long-term units within the development shall be subject to a lease restriction instead of a deed restriction, requiring that the unit be used exclusively for workforce housing, and this restriction shall be included in all rental agreements. So that goes back to why we needed those definitions that were originally proposed. Just to talk about that for a second, I know when we talked about multifamily at this level, and even when we had the joint workshop with the Board of Commissioners, there appeared to be a consensus at that time that if we were going to have any additional multifamily units constructed within the town, it would not be done so to further additional vacation rentals or short-term rentals. We wouldn't want to have additional units if that's what it was going to become. And the way to prevent any unit from becoming short-term rental would be to put this restriction on it. So deed restriction or lease restriction. So that's why we wrote that in there, just in case there was still this consensus that if we're going to have multifamily, we want it to be for workforce housing. The fifth condition we have is consistent with the North Carolina Building Code interior space dimensions. Each unit shall conform to the following requirements. The unit shall have a living room of not less than 220 square feet of floor area, and an additional 100 square feet of floor area shall be provided for each additional occupant of such unit in excess of 2. So your 220 living space is going to get you 2 occupants. You would have to have more than that to have any additional occupant. You would have to go up to 320 to just have that third occupant based upon this. Also included, and this language was actually right out of the North Carolina Building Code. I did include that section in your packet. It looks like this, it's highlighted in yellow. I will say I did not take the liberty to deviate from this or wordsmith the document. So I clipped that in there as it is. So the unit shall be provided with a separate closet. Obviously that closet is not going to count towards the 220. That closet is not part of the living space. The unit shall be provided with a kitchen sink, cooking appliances, and refrigeration facilities, each having a clear working space of not less than 30 inches in front. Portable electric cooking equipment shall not fulfill the requirement for cooking appliances. In addition, portable cooking equipment employing flame shall be prohibited. So this portion about the portable cooking equipment, that's actually not in here, but that was a condition that we had seen previously and we all felt was a good condition. The unit shall be provided with a separate bathroom containing a water closet, lavatory, and bathtub or shower. Every unit shall be supplied with facilities providing heat. Portable kerosene heaters are not acceptable as a permanent source of heat. This next one, this .7, I included more details in the staff report, but I had hoped that if the planning board were inclined to recommend approval of this conversion from a transient to long-term, that we may want to have more discussion on this item. It states every unit shall be supplied and installed with a minimum of 1 approved and listed smoke alarm. And then highlighted there for planning board discussion is consideration of a condition that this use shall comply with the requirements for a commercial fire alarm system. So I added this in there because today, if someone were to come to us and say that they were constructing a 29 unit, 30 unit on-grade apartment complex. That would be considered multifamily, based upon the definition that we currently have. And if I'm not mistaken, the North Carolina Fire Prevention Code would require a new 30-unit apartment building to be sprinkler protected. So with this conversion, there's no requirement that they retrofit it with sprinklers, but at a minimum, the thought was, if we can't retrofit it with sprinklers, given that just the long-term rental nature of this, you're going to have stovetops, you're going to have other appliances, you're just going to have day-to-day long-term living, that it might be beneficial to consider a requirement for a commercial fire alarm system. And we have the fire chief, deputy chief here, if you want to know more about that. But in essence, it's going to have that interconnected alarm system, so when one goes off, they're all going to go off, and you're going to get everybody out of there, is the goal. So we can talk more about that. I don't know if you want to stop here and talk about that, or if you just want me to roll through and circle back. You tell me.
Let's roll through and then we'll
Okay.
circle back to specific issues.
Okay.
Please.
The next condition, minimum parking requirements, is noted in section 10. That's further down in the amendments, but essentially what we proposed there was 2 parking spaces per unit. Utility meters of any type for individual units are prohibited. This condition and the one below it pertaining to the units having to operate under a single unified rental management operation, those 2 conditions are very similar to what we already have in our cottage court ordinance. And that's to prevent the circumvention of our subdivision ordinance, so that you're not coming in there and having the ability to have electric and water to each unit and then condo those units out individually. Or at least kind of to deter people from doing that. All goods, materials, and equipment must be stored indoors or in an approved location in a manner that is not visible from public right-of-way or neighboring properties. Again, at this level, we have discussed, if you're a long-term renter, you've got things that you're bringing with you that you may not have if you're just coming for a week stay at a hotel. And these are relatively small spaces, approximately 250 square feet. So just making sure that any materials and goods are stored in a proper fashion. And then this last condition, if after having received approval for the conversion of transient hotel units to long-term rental units, the operator wants to transition the long-term rental back to the hotel unit, this may be done through the change of use, special use permit process, the same as what we had stated you would have to do to get to the long term. You would also have to go through that process to get back to short term. Such conversion shall be allowed only if no changes or alterations have been made to the structure and or site that would increase the degree of nonconformity with the zoning regulations. And these next items are things we've already talked about, but just to see it in ordinance form, we would be adding long-term rental hotel units to section 6.6, requiring that as a special use in the C2 zoning district. Those conditions that we just ran through, that's part of section 7.12.3. And then we have the parking standard there, 2 parking spaces per unit. Think that is it in terms of the actual ordinance language. I will go back up to the staff report. We did include the December staff report and the January staff report, just in case anybody wanted to go back and review those. As far as staff recommendation at this point, I did note that obviously we do have concerns, and a concern that I have at this point in time is that this type of transition from a hotel transient unit to a long-term unit, it's multifamily. It's essentially multifamily. If somebody were doing this today from scratch, it would be multifamily. And unfortunately, we currently don't allow multifamily within any zoning district within the code. It's something that we're actively working on, but as of today, it's not allowed. So that's my primary concern, is that we would be recommending approval of a use that is not allowed anywhere within the town at this point. Other concerns relate to those that we've talked about previously. The concerns that when we talk about SROs, as Gary had mentioned, the ability to gain access into these units for periodic fire inspections based upon the North Carolina Prevention Code. Deputy Chief Shane Hite can speak to that if you would like. As we've already stated, given their age, most of these structures, or all of these structures, predate modern fire code and building code requirements, so that's something notable. And from a staff perspective, the ability to realistically enforce the 90-day long-term occupancy requirement and the workforce requirements would be very difficult. Also, potential for parking concerns, noise concerns, and just behavioral concerns, again, like we had discussed with SROs. So, I didn't really provide a formal recommendation. I thought we could talk about it. I'm obviously happy to do whatever this board wishes as far as moving this forward. But it is hard for me to make a recommendation for a use that we currently don't allow. So that's what I have for you today. Mr. DeLucia is here as well as Mr. Velasa, if you have any questions.
Okay, does anybody have questions for Kelly at this point? Specific questions regarding
Well,
her?
one question I have about, you said there's no multifamily allowed within the town at all. Is that correct?
Currently, and this will come up in our board action report, but so, you know, the planning board had drafted the ordinance, and then it was presented to the Board of Commissioners with the, at that point, the recommendation was C2 lots, small multifamily, large multifamily, the revised density requirements. They had concerns about the ordinance and essentially tabled it for the time being. So because they didn't take an action, there's actually no district that allows multifamily currently. It will in the future, but just today.
Somehow I thought
not.
the CR, the commercial residential oceanfront, allowed for multifamily. No, I'm mistaken?
No, it does not. The whole time
Okay.
we've been working on this, it's only been allowed in the C2.
Well, then this conversion from short-term to long-term, it would not, how would it impact on the current proposed multifamily regulations that we're looking at? I mean, in other words, are we going to be basically recommending nonconformities or what? I mean, that's my question, I guess.
Yeah, so in I guess it was in last month's staff report, and I can go back to that, but essentially I had taken what the planning board had recommended for our multifamily
Right.
ordinance and just said, okay, if this gets adopted, how does this affect this? And the piece about the deed restrictions was noted, as well as the density would be different. So there would be more density allowed in this scenario than would be allowed under our, this would technically fall under the large multifamily. So there would be an increase in density, but I feel a little hesitant to say that. It's unfair to make that judgment now because it sounds like this ordinance could be changing again.
So I'm wondering, does anybody else have specific questions? I'm wondering at this point if, how we feel in general about moving forward with it at all, considering that we have no multifamily allowed in the town right now. And as much as, we certainly can hear from the applicant, but to go through some of the specific items, I'm sure, we've talked about them for a couple of months, and I'm sure we could talk about them more. The fire departments here and and learn some more about these kind of things. But at this point, I don't.
Would it be worth it just because fire is here, just to go through that piece to resolve that discussion item? Just for use of staff?
Yeah, we certainly could. We could, and we could hear from obviously hear from the applicant as well. But I'm just, wondering where everybody's coming from as far as if we're not really considering this thing because of the basic fact that, personally, that's how I feel. I'm not sure how we can really make a recommendation on this when this is multifamily, in my opinion. The use is certainly multifamily.
Could there be such a thing as a conditional recommendation? Saying that if the Board of Commissioners decides with certain changes to move forward with this and approve this, at least we would give the board some indication at this point in time that this specific ordinance would be something that, if all else met our conditions, that we would at least let the board know that, if they approve multifamily, we would recommend that this would be included. So it's like a conditional recommendation, just to give them some sort of an indication of our thinking.
I'm guessing we could make a conditional recommendation.
I don't see any reason why not. I think we could also just convey after this conversation that the consensus was the planning board was comfortable with it in this scenario. When and if multifamily is back in the ordinance, we can always bring this back to you, just as an update.
It's pretty much gonna be, we're gonna have multifamily in some way, shape, or form. I'm pretty sure, aren't y'all?
But, I would imagine eventually, but, then how does this line up with any of it,
Well, and that's the question, as it is, it sounds as if multifamily is going to be leaving our hands.
Well, it is. It has.
And,
Temporarily, maybe.
Yeah.
but even that process, and that, I'm not sure that we should digress into that path right now, but if we are resolved as a group, as I agree, we can at least nudge this further forward by hearing the fire side on this, and then resolve all the issues we have in front of us right now to the point where we can go as far as that before the multifamily piece.
Okay, sounds like that's what people are wanting to do. So Kelly, we don't need to talk to Kelly anymore. She's finished her summary. Did people, do we want to hear from the applicant next, please? And then we can.
Yeah, I'm seeing a vigorously shaking.
Good morning. I'm John DeLucia from Albemarle. Mr. Leo Galassis here with us. We did have several meetings and discussions with staff over the last month. There are some things in this ordinance that we would prefer not be there. Actually, it's not. We're asking for an ordinance amendment, but there are some things in this ordinance that we do not agree with at this point. And so I'll just go with those. There's only a couple items. One of them would be the definitions, the qualified person and the workforce housing. We've never have asked this board to consider this to be workforce housing or low-income housing or anything of the sort. Mr. Gloss has stated that he's got people that are down here that need a place to live, that have been looking for apartments, and been looking for rooms, houses. So the good likelihood is the people that they're going to rent to will be people that are working here. But he doesn't want to be limited to that. So Section 7.12.3.4 All long-term rental units within the development shall be subject to a lease restriction requiring that the unit be used exclusively for workforce housing. We never asked for that condition, and we do not want that condition in the ordinance. And the other item that we have that we take issue with is the conversion back. If we ever wanted to convert it back to the short-term rentals, yes, I agree we should go through a change of use with staff, with the administration, but why take 3 months? 3 or 4 months to go back to what we have right now. I mean, we don't have a problem with the change of use. I just think it shouldn't necessarily be a special use and have to go through that formal process to come back to the planning board to say, nothing's changed, now we're going to rent it by the night. And they're not planning to make any changes. Just to hit on some, and the third thing is I still think 2 parking spaces per unit is too much. We can accommodate it, but I think it still should be like 1.5 per unit would be more in line. That's not something that I don't think we're willing to go to battle for because we can accommodate it with parking on the next door, on the property there next door. And as far as the smoke alarm, they already have smoke alarm systems within the hotel. I'm not sure if it's a commercial. I don't think it's a pull handle type. And I don't know whether it's wired up, but they do have smoke and alarms in each unit right now, just to let you know that. And everything else in the ordinance, we agree with. We were here in December, we were here in January. We would very much like to be pushed forward to the Board of Commissioners and get this into their discussions for this use. I understand your concern about not having the multifamily in place, but I mean, we're talking about somewhat of a different animal, doing a conversion of an existing hotel into short-term or long-term rentals. We're non-conforming. We're not going to change things. We're going to make the place better. We're going to make it more habitable. And with that, I'll be quiet. I mean, we really are very, very close on an ordinance, I think, that will accommodate. We're too late in the season for them to implement this ordinance anytime soon. I mean, they're going to open it as a hotel because they have to for the season. So if this is going to happen, it's not going to happen for another year, at least. And, at that time, we'll make a decision. We need to get the ordinance in place so that we can make a decision whether we want to make the application for the special use.
Why is the workforce housing a sticky point? Why is that?
Okay, take for instance, an elderly lady loses her husband. The house is too big. She doesn't need anything that big. She'd like to live close to the beach, close to the restaurant, close to Cahoon's. She wouldn't qualify.
All right.
Somebody who is working here and then decides not that they don't need to work for the next 6 months or they're going to go somewhere, then they wouldn't be qualified as workforce housing. So while the intention is to lease to people that are here that need a place to live now, and certainly some of those people are in our workforce, probably most of them are in our workforce, they don't want to be limited to that in this.
I have a question about storage.
Yes.
If in your example, the lady that lives by herself in this house and that's too big and she sells it and wants to be within walking distance of amenities, but she brings things with her that she wants to store.
She's going to have to store like my family and my sons and daughters do in storage facilities. I mean, we've got ample storage here. We have ample storage across the bridge.
But things that she wants to get to, like a cooker or something, is there any capacity to have storage for people that are going to be in these units for a period of time?
I don't think there'd be much. I mean, there might be the ability to, there might be the ability to utilize some of the enclosed space right now for some cabinets. Because there is some mechanical rooms and there's some back porches and things like that. But if we built anything else out there, we couldn't build it onto the building because it would be, it's a non-conforming building. You know, so making those types, really, these aren't set up for people to bring a bunch of furniture with them. You know,
Or suitcases or
right.
things.
Bikes, surfboards.
Okay.
Thank you. Anybody else? Questions for the applicant?
Would you be amenable to a residency, if not workforce?
They don't want to be limited to who they can rent these units to.
Okay.
I mean, it was never our intention when we came in to make these low-income housing, workforce housing, they were gonna be studio apartments that anybody could rent,
So even short-term rentals.
rather than a short-term rental.
Right.
You know, they have short-term rentals right now,
Mhm.
they're a hotel. They're gonna run it as a hotel this summer. If you haven't gone down there and looked, you ought to go into the courtyard. I mean, it's been painted, the doors have been replaced, or repainted, the insides look great. There's vinyl on the floors. I mean, they've done a really good job bringing the property back up to at least some kind of standard.
So how much work would you estimate when you're finished is being done? It's, you know, compared to the total value of the building? Okay. But it sounds like a lot of upgrades.
Oh,
New floors, new paint,
Mm-hmm.
new
new furniture.
Mm-hmm.
repairing some of the bathrooms.
Some of the bathrooms.
Electrical work was redone. I mean, they've spent considerable amount of money since they built it, or bought it.
And for
Improve.
the purpose of, because without this ordinance, this was for the purpose of use as a hotel?
Well,
I mean, are
it's-
there permits involved for the upgrades?
No,
Only where we need it, I guess.
yeah, where they needed to get permits, but, you know, for painting and putting pulling out the old carpets and things like that, they didn't have to have permits.
But as a hotel, you're improving it as a hotel, the work that's being done now, because,
Yeah.
okay,
So,
okay.
Oh, when it reopens in March, it's gonna reopen as
Right.
the hotel again, because we haven't gotten this into place and
Right.
approved in order to, it not to be.
Mhm.
So it's gonna be a hotel it's gonna continue to operate like it's operated for 4 years,
Mhm.
but nicer.
Okay, anybody else? And I think we have questions about fire suppression alarms and all, and we can either start or we can
But
just
John,
go
I
straight
mean,
to
I
the
was
experts.
just curious. I mean, I thought one of the benefits, or one of the things the planning board was trying to do, based on the direction of the whole Outer Banks, was to provide available housing for workforce housing. And I understand the problem with the definition, but nevertheless, I mean, you know, one of our goals, one of our town goals, I thought, was to open up, I guess you can call it essential housing, workforce housing, whatever. I thought that was one of our main missions. I thought that's what we were about. I mean, wasn't that kind of like, that's how we got into a part
Any
of
of this.
entertaining this idea anyhow? I mean, that's just coming from my
Well,
perspective.
No, I got that impression as well. I know you never guaranteed they were going to be workforce, but I certainly got the impression that that was a focus
Yeah.
of, you know, considering this type of conversion.
Well, I think there is the desire by the Colossus to go ahead and rent these to people that are living and working down here, but I don't think they want it to be pigeonholed that this has to be workforce housing, because it doesn't. You know, there was consideration on tearing the building down, building some other commercial uses on it. You know, but it's a nice building, it's been here a long time, it's kind of heritage, and it'd be kind of cool to live in the Owens courtyard.
Okay, thanks. All right, do we want to get the experts on fire to the podium, please? On fire prevention, I should say, right?
Good morning, how are y'all?
Fine, thank you.
So I guess the first question is, do you all have any specific questions, or would you just kind of like to talk about the overview of what would be required, so to speak, in today's world as we move ahead? Which way would you kind of like
I
to?
think that would be helpful. Say
Okay.
they were coming to a, say this was a new project.
Sure, and so, there's two ways to look at this. Number one, this project in itself, but then the overall picture. And the reason why I say that is because this facility may be different than another facility. So, at a minimum, I think one of the easiest ways to handle the fire alarm component is to simply recommend that the fire alarm system or smoke detector system be based off of the current fire code, which means if you have a small unit, so to speak, say the 250 square foot units that open up into the outside, then the basic requirement is at least one smoke alarm. But it's also based off of manufacturer's recommendations, so there might be multiples because of distances and things like that, which is where you come into the smoke alarms that are wired together. So if you have a room that would require 3, the idea would be that all 3 of those, if one goes off, they all 3 go off. If it's a much smaller room that only requires 1, then of course 1 goes off. The idea is that the next door unit will most likely hear that alarm. If you change this to, say, a space that has interior corridors, similar to what you would see in maybe some other occupancies in town that have hallways, you would have these smoke alarms inside of those rooms, but then you would have smoke detectors wired to a fire alarm system in the hallway. Again, the idea is that if I burn my dinner, I know about it. However, if my building's on fire and I open the door, it goes out into the hallway, everybody needs to know about it. The other side of this is yes, if you were building this today and applying for a permit, most likely it would be required to have a sprinkler system. The other side of this is if you were to look at this as a multi-story, because again, I think there's different places we could look at. There's other fire alarm component requirements. Say if there's a 2-story, 3-story building, you would also have to have what's called a manual pull stations exterior to the rooms on each floor. So that's why I say it's kind of difficult to look at one project as you look at the entire ordinance, and maybe the wording should be simply put that based upon the current fire prevention code requirements.
How many of those other conditions would apply to the other areas of this type that are included in this? I think it's at the pre-1974.
Right.
72.
72, I'm sorry.
And so, like I say, so roadway in, that one would be one because it's multi-stories that you would see the manual fire alarm requirements come in. Owens Motor Court's all single story, if I remember correctly. So that one would be the interior smoke alarms, depending upon the size, that get tied together. First Colony, I think you'd have some differences there because of the multi-story and because I believe there's some interior corridors as well. Nags Beach Inn, because of the occupancy there, when it was originally permitted a few years ago, or when the change of occupancy took place a few years ago, it has a commercial fire alarm system in it. So that one's already been done. And sorry, I skipped Tar Heel. It would be the similar as Owens Motel.
That seems like that would be easy enough to encapsulate into language that could be put in this on the contingency that.
I would think.
Yeah. Is there any drive aisle, parking, accessibility issues that should be concerned as well?
So the big thing in the fire code is you have a 20-foot fire lane, which we like to be maintained, and was what the fire code calls for, and that's 20-foot exclusive of curbs and things like that block it. There is also a document that talks about within 150 feet of all sides of the structure that you can make access to. I think the big thing here is these long ones, say at Tar Heel, you would want to make sure that that aisle through there is not obstructed. So I don't know how the parking works out as far as what's there, but what's there, I believe, is compliant, so you wouldn't want to get it to a point that's not as good as what's there now.
Mhm.
So as well, that seems to you you would be able to come up with verbiage
Right.
pulled from the fire code that would be on the contingent that multifamily was approved, this would be.
Mhm. Yeah, that'd be no problem.
Okay. Seems reasonable to me. Anybody else have specific questions, or?
Have we gone through a TR, our technical review committee meeting with this proposal? I mean, with the one that Mr. Glosses is already requesting of us? I don't know, have we done that? And if so, has the fire department been involved in that? I was just, I'm just curious, I don't know.
No, if this passes and they proceed, they'll submit their information for the special use permit, and then it will go to TRC. But no one has submitted site-specific information at this point.
Right, that's why I was attempting to speak of in general, so to speak, about what the requirements would be, because like Kelly said, we would have a set of plans that would show us the dimensions and so forth to go by, and a TRC.
Okay.
Any additional?
Well, sprinkler protecting a building, like the First Colony Inn, you say was built in 32 or whatever, but I think they have retrofitted that sprinkler system in right now, so it's fully sprinkled, if I understand it correctly.
Yes.
But I'm curious about the cost, I mean, I know you guys are in the public safety stuff, but, the conversion from multifamily, or conversion of, short-term to long-term rental, and then the associated cost of sprinkler protecting it, I'm just wondering, do you have a rough idea of what the cost would be to sprinkler protect? We're looking at the one motel. I know motels are all different, I know that. I mean, but just...
I'd be afraid to speculate in today's
And also,
cost.
isn't there a difference? I mean, this comes from the First Colony Inn owner. I mean, she was going through Camille Lawrence, or whatever. Anyhow, she was going through a lot of difficulty with trying to understand the sprinkler protecting requirements for her business, because they were like putting sprinklers in, I don't know, walk-in closets or in bathrooms. I don't know. When someone says it's sprinkler protected, what exactly does that mean relative to how much of a building inside has to be sprinkler protected?
So in a commercial motel type facility,
Yeah.
You would actually, every space, including egress spaces, would be protected, with the exception of some small closet spaces, which is generally, I think it's 75 square foot or less, but I can't remember those exact numbers. Bathrooms would be, the rooms would be, the egress routes would be, and if the occupancy chose to say have storage up under it, that space would have to be as well. Now, if you switch over to different residential occupancies, there are some differences and some changes that occur to that, especially for single-story residentials. But the idea is generally every space in a commercial-type setting like the hotel.
Okay. Anybody else? Questions? Thank you.
Thank you all.
We appreciate the information.
You're welcome.
Okay. So if we have no questions remaining for anybody, let's discuss.
I think the fire piece seems pretty standard. The other items,
Specifically, aside from the sprinklers or including the sprinklers?
well, aside from the sprinklers, the code that exists for fire alarms, and the real distinction seems to be adjacent area and/or multi-story. That should be reasonably easy to confabulate into something that works into this
For the alarms?
for the alarms. And
So I guess I do have a question. Why was Nags Head Beach Inn brought, somebody said, into compliance? What triggered that? Sorry, you barely got sitting back down.
So, several years ago, that went through what we considered a significant change of use. because it was on-site management. I think they have on-site management now, but it was significant from the original design. So we looked at that and spoke with the developer, and we came to an agreement. There is a stipulation in the fire code that because if there's a significant change in use and there is a hazard that's apparent, we can institute certain requirements based upon the fire code. So that's when we put on that facility that they would have a complete fire alarm system. They do have rooms, though, that open up to a center corridor, and I believe there's cooking spaces, and I believe there's no, there's not cooking spaces, is there?
No, wasn't it a bed and breakfast originally?
Yeah, it was a bed and breakfast,
Right.
and then it went to basically
So-
room rentals,
It went from bed and breakfast to,
to basically short-term.
Room rent, yeah, just room rental. So
Okay.
Right.
okay.
hotel room, I think there are.
But it has all the features, interior corridor, so it's got the smoke alarms in the corridor, and it has the, a full system that would call us if there's an event.
So, but this change of use wouldn't trigger that?
If you were to look at this specific one, it's a little bit different because it opens up to the exterior when you
Mhm.
come out of a room. But that's also why I said I'd be afraid to say and
Right.
base this off of one specific, and it might be better to use the language of the requirements of the current North Carolina Fire Code, because
Right.
that would change based upon stories, interior corridors, things of that nature.
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So in general, do we want to consider a conditional recommendation here? Is that what I'm hearing from my fellow board members?
That's my thinking.
Okay,
Yeah, that seems.
and you as well?
Yeah, I'm with you.
Gary, what are you thinking?
Again, I go back to my original question, which I thought was dealing with the question of essential housing, or not affordable, but, providing additional housing that folks who I think help operate the town, providing housing for those folks, I thought was one of our missions, one of our reasons for looking at this. And I mean, obviously, the applicant can come before us with anything that they wish, but at the same time, I mean, that's where I'm coming from with it. So I don't really like it. I don't support it.
As it's written, you don't like it, or with the
Well, I mean, the
modifications?
applicant, no, well, as it's written right now, yes, but the applicant
Yeah.
has problems with the definitions. And so, given the applicant has, he doesn't want to be limited to just, hey, I don't want to just rent to essential housing needs. I got other things I'm interested in.
I understand the differences, but, so, for this issue, does it make sense for us to say that we are conditionally amenable to the language that's in front of us with the addition of fire input? And because we're looking down the line a year away with however this goes, why not at least nudge that further forward to create some degree of concord on the contingency that?
I totally agree. And Gary, I'd just like to follow up on your concern. And it's a very legitimate concern, and you're right. I mean, our focus is essential housing and with an emphasis on workforce. The fact that they're doing this doesn't preclude what
Right.
we're trying to do.
Sure.
I mean, it could end up 50-60% of people that are working here living in a long-term unit. So, I mean, it opens up opportunities,
Mhm.
is my point, for workforce housing or essential housing for workers in this area. So it at least,
I get it.
it
Yeah.
alleviates some of the problems, and without pigeonholing them into just doing this.
As well, it does allow for, if they want to convert to short-term use, that period of time where they would inform the town that they are applying for that other use, if that's where that wants to go. Maybe.
Well, I agree with the applicant. I mean, I agree with John DeLucia on this issue of, to convert it back to short-term from long-term. I don't see a big deal with that. I mean, it's already short-term. I mean, no, I mean,
As long as there aren't any changes that, you know.
well, yeah, I mean, the changes are only going to be improvements. They're going to, things
Hopefully,
like,
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
they're going to improve the fire, they're going to improve stuff, so
But
I feel like to go back, to go through a 3-month ordeal, I'm a little bit concerned with that. I think
that could be done by staff.
I think so.
Right.
To go back, to go back to.
But
when-
how often would you be comfortable with that? I mean, do
I
we
don't
want to
know.
be
I
going
can't-
back
well,
and forth?
I'm just saying, I don't think that's what the applicant has in mind at all. I mean, given, I don't know.
Well,
I mean,
one respondent did say that they were interested in doing both seasonally. One of the other facilities that was
Right,
told.
you're right.
So I would be concerned about that.
Mhm.
I guess I would say if we're going down the line, I would tend to agree more, or I say agree with you. I have concerns about it because of I understand that you're saying it would open up some opportunity, but there's no willingness to even talk about a percentage, or, it could also turn into something completely different,
It could.
and there would be nothing in the current ordinance to prevent that. Even the, monitoring of long-term leases, whether it be for essential housing, workforce housing, whatever you want to call it, that's going to be very challenging. To even know that there are people in there long-term, 90 days is what it reads.
Right.
So I'm concerned about it, I guess, is all I'm saying, especially in view of the fact that we don't have a clear guidance, or, we don't have a decision on multifamily in general. So, but I'm not, I'm certainly willing to hear what my fellow board members think. If they want to weigh in. Christy, you just got here, come on.
No, and that piece, as it exists, I agree that that this is a static piece, that it's something that's workable. However, if that is a continuing concern, that's something that needs to be talked about in the long term. There are the issues that exist, as I understand it, are workforce, residency, and how long it would take for it to transition from one to the other.
Could it be possible that we would consider or ask if there's a certain percentage of these units that could be set aside for workers?
I mean, that was one thing we did in the multifamily ordinance.
Yes.
But again, it's tabled, so we have, but no, we're not precluded from asking, just like they're not.
Right.
But trying to decide what to do today, whether it's better to do take a vote on a conditional recommendation with the following caveats, or just to say, we're not sure yet. If we don't, we don't have enough information about the whole plan to move forward.
I mean, I want to see this happen, because I think we need housing. But at the same time, the ordinance that we just sent up was that it had to be workforce, or at least a portion had to be workforce. And now we're going to send something that we can't just take that out, and say, oh, well, never mind for this.
It would
Yeah.
also bring, if as proposed, it would bring it out of compliance with what we gave to the BSC for multifamily
Right.
because of that.
Can we ask the owners if that would be?
You mean the applicant?
Mhm.
I think they made it clear, don't you?
Yeah.
Well, they made it clear that they don't want it to be just that,
Mm-hmm.
but can we compromise and say, could we have 60% or whatever that we're asking for? Is there room for compromise here, saying some of these rooms would be specifically for workers and workforce, and the others don't have to be?
Yes. I think most of them will be workforce. We could do 50%.
What's
I think
consistent?
guaranteed maybe, or something.
Yeah, not specific rooms, just 50% of the rooms will be workforce, yeah.
I mean, that's more in line with what we just said we wanted with multifamily.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And I don't know what's gonna become of that, but,
Right.
but
Keep
that's
coming
what
back
we
to
want,
that,
that's what we
don't we?
said we wanted.
But I mean, if we could have that in writing, and that's part of the agreement. and-
Well, this would be, you know,
In
part
your
of the text amendment, so I
Right.
guess we need to ask staff about, you know,
Yes, so one thing that I was thinking we could do, this is already planning to go to the Board of Commissioners consent agenda on their March meeting. So it would be consent agenda March and public hearing in April. We could go ahead and let it continue on that path and still have time to bring it to you with these minor revisions at your March meeting. Another thing that we can consider doing is having two ordinances, a planning board recommended and a applicant requested. And, you know, planning board, what's presented as planning board recommended is obviously what we'll come to a consensus on. And then we can say, should it come to that, as far as the applicant requested, you know, planning board recommended denial, these were the sticking points. So I don't know if that's
Have you ever done that before, is it, with anything?
Yeah, yeah, there was a period of time where we often had 2 or 3 versions of an ordinance going, what was requested, what was recommended, and
Okay.
then a variation, so it gave them
Mhm.
options, so we could put forward your requested.
Well,
Absolutely.
well, if what I'm hearing is we'll have another chance to sit down with the planning board before it goes to commissioners.
But keep it on consent agenda, just so that public hearings still
So
scheduled
it
for
gets
April.
set. And I don't think we'll have 2 ordinances. I think we're like this close right now. Kelly and I can get together with Andy and Joe and Leor and figure out how to write in the 50%, if that's acceptable. It's coming back to you anyway, right?
That sounds good. What about the other issues, John? Are you going to also bring those back? I mean, the thing of conversion back and forth?
I mean, I think if.
Well, I mean, as long as staff is cool with that. I mean, I'm okay with that. I personally, I'm okay, but I'm just like, I just was curious about what the issues are in your mind. I mean, we brought up the conversion factor, the definition factor.
Well, I mean, we didn't want to be limited to all workforce housing.
Right.
I mean, and so
That's,
if-
gets back to the definitions. I got you.
If the Colossus are willing to say, well, 50% of it will be that way, then
Okay.
that's great. I mean, probably more than that will be, but we'll guarantee that we'll do 50%.
Good.
And we'll just redraft that ordinance.
Yeah, and I had communicated with John earlier, as long as there's no changes and we can confirm that, I think staff is amenable to making it an administrative decision to go from long-term back to short-term, as long as no changes have been made. So we're in agreement with that.
Okay.
okay, so do I hear a motion in the making?
I always have a hard time when it comes to making motions. I always feel I get a little anxiety.
I
Yeah,
understand.
how to
I
put the
understand.
words together. I feel that others
Kelly?
are better at putting.
I feel like you're like that.
Just, I almost feel like as
We
long
don't
as,
need to, we're just gonna push it forward as,
I feel like as long as we can
You're
say
good
that
at it.
there's a general consensus among the planning board, that
To
there's a
move forward.
desire for this to move forward, they want to maintain the track that it's on. We understand the staff will be coming back with revisions to, changing that NC Fire Prevention Code language to say the current code, working on a percentage dedicated to workforce housing, and then pulling back on the special use process to administrative for revert back.
For just to revert back. We're
Yep.
still gonna keep it on.
Yes. And then I feel like staff will still maintain 2 parking spaces.
And we were gonna watch it for a year, so remember we talked
Yes.
about that?
Yeah, and we can always, yes,
Revisit it if we need to.
we can. I don't know if anyone on this board remembers, but we've done things where we've allowed uses and asked them to monitor their parking for a certain period of time and come back. And if we need to revisit the parking, we certainly can.
just parking though you're talking about, no, okay,
Yes.
okay. All right, great, well, if you're good with it, we'll just move forward like that and expect to see it next month and leave it as it is with the
Yes.
Board of Commissioners.
And I'll put this on our, the planning director's report for Board of Commissioners so that they know the planning board heard it generally want to see it move forward. Keep it on track for public hearing.
Okay, great, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you.
Bye-bye. Okay, so we are now going to move on to consideration of a text amendment to prohibit driving over and/or parking on septic systems when adjacent to driveways. Thank you, gentlemen. Hi, Joe.
Hello, hi, good
Hi,
morning.
David. Seen a lot.
Hi, David.
The Septic Health Advisory Committee met in October and recommended the town consider prohibiting or at least deterring parking or driving on septic areas, disposal fields. This was brought to you at the November meeting, and the planning board unanimously said, let's see a text amendment that does that. So included in your packet are definitions of what a septic system area is, as well as some key terms within that definition, like septic tank, disposal field, and septic system. These definitions were circulated to the Septic Health Advisory Committee, and their input was included in these definitions. So we relied on our local experts and to make those sort of correct. I think a big part of the issue currently is that vacationers and property owners don't really know they have a septic in many cases, and if they do, they don't necessarily understand the potential problems with parking or driving on them, that it can crack the tank, it can rupture pipes, or it can damage soils that inhibits the function of the septic system. And so we've defined what an area, the septic area is, and we basically have recommended that that area is somehow blocked off with a physical barrier, and we've tried to provide a number of options to sort of not, have sort of this monotonous same fix for it. We've also made the recommendation to only apply to residential properties. It's in the residential parking area because we feel that through the site plan approval process with commercial properties, we have the mechanism during the site plan review process to ensure that parking and septic areas are distinguished, and there's curbing and parking stops and other things that keep from parking and driving on new commercial development. This ordinance would apply to new residential or existing residential that goes through a substantial change, which would be a more than 50% increase. It could be from expansion of habitable area or changes to the driveway. We've also defined it to only be required to do this kind of treatment, this physical barrier, when it is directly adjacent to a driveway. So, for instance, if you have a driveway and you have parking in your septic field in your rear yard with a fence around it, you wouldn't be required to then, fence it in again, or, if you had an open backyard. So it's really only if it's directly adjacent to a driveway. Staff also recognizes that there is an educational and outreach component to this, that we would, try to get the word out to property management companies, property owners. We've talked about making a video that could potentially sort of outline the hazards and the risks of the costly repairs that would come with, parking and driving and messing up your septic, and what potential things we would allow. So if accepted, as I said, it only apply to residential properties, and to enforce it, we would first kind of lean on this outreach. We would provide a warning, and then only if continued violations occur would we issue a notice of violation. So I'm happy to go through any questions you have. And Connor's here as well, who's our resident septic expert and can help answer more technical questions.
I think it's a great idea.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do too.
Hey, Joe, one question I have, what's the minimum distance, a setback is, how far does a septic system, be it a tank or a drain field, from a property line?
From a,
Do you know? I mean,
don't know
I'm
if
not
we-
sure. I thought there is a separation from each property line, and then when you add things like wet ponds and dry ponds and stuff like that, it even changes it more. It makes it even worse. I mean, in terms of the setback may be increased if you have a wet pond or a dry pond close to a property line near a septic system. And that's why I was just wondering, is there a separation requirement or from a septic system to a property line? Is there a distance, a minimum distance?
I don't know.
There is. I don't know. I'm not sure what it is.
You should measure from 5 feet from your property line to your components. Now, when you start adding in, wells and, wetlands and things like that, that distance increases.
Thank you.
I appreciate the care that, like the different types of barriers or barrier devices that you've used in this, which,
Right.
it does encourage landscaping. But a significant portion of this, as you said, is going to go into attempting to inform the public instead of just solving the short-term parking problem. They may be creating a longer-term problem.
You mean putting cars all over the street?
Well, no. The longer-term problem being, it might not work. The septic situation is an expensive problem to have, and it always happens on a Saturday afternoon. Yeah.
You mean a failure?
Yeah, failure.
Joe, I noticed that there's no proposal to deal with the repair areas. The area for the, and I thought the health department does have or did have a requirement for basically, leaving the repair area as it currently is, or whatever, natural. Am I mistaken? But there's no, I mean, when I look at the definitions and stuff of what is the disposal area and everything, I just, somehow, the repair area you don't speak to that. I mean, I'm just curious as to why.
Yeah, we haven't defined that. In my understanding and circulating it with the Septic Health Advisory Committee, they didn't feel a need to have added regulation from the local ordinance as opposed to what's already allowed and approved as far as Dare County Health. I don't think we would be potentially against that. My understanding is for certain lots, it would be problematic in that, the septic area might be in the rear yard and then you have the repair area in the front yard. So we'd be kind of requiring a lot of protection and sort of physical barriers in people's yards. And the reality is, the repair area isn't a part of the functioning septic system. So people may be unwilling to provide that barrier in that circumstance.
You also, in your discussion, you don't seem to talk too much about the height. You talk about, how the setbacks and stuff, you qualify that. But I was wondering, what about, you say a raised bed? 3 inches is good enough? Is it 8 inches? I mean, I'm just curious about, how high is a raised bed? And maybe I don't. It used to be in the older days, the town used to contribute or help give away vegetation and stuff like that. And this might be a good opportunity, in addition to the septic health, to say, hey, look, the town will provide, I don't know, free whatever, some kind of plantings. I don't know if it's trees or whatever it is, but things that might be able to grow in the zone or the area where the septic system is going.
You don't want trees too close to the septic.
Yeah, you don't want trees
Yeah.
on the
Well,
septic.
you know what I'm saying.
Throw it.
Well, that's,
People can afford it.
and
know
that's
what you
what
mean.
my understanding was we used to
People can
require
afford it, people can
plantings and then we had issues with
Yeah.
root systems from those required
Yeah.
plantings getting in the barrier. We tried to keep it flexible and not so definitive. I think the idea is if someone's really, whether it's post and rope and unhooking the rope or whatever, there's a way to still do that, but the idea of having a physical barrier.
How about cut tires, truck tires,
I mean, if the zoning administrator wants to approve that kind of treatment, but I think the idea would be to have something that kind of signals to someone, like a vacationer coming in, that
Right.
I shouldn't drive over this and park here. And it would be to the discretion of the zoning administrator.
If the town was gonna pay for anything, I wouldn't say it would be plantings, but maybe like a little sign that said septic area, just put it right there, so people would be like, I'm not gonna move the rope.
Like, we love the signs for
And,
inside
actually,
houses.
Molly, Kelly had the same thought that we could
Okay.
hand that out to new people who come in and get a new you know, or have plans approved to build a new home, we could basically hand them a small sign. As a part of this, we didn't touch the sign ordinance. You know, it's pretty complex and pretty restrictive as is on what you can have. You can have the one sign on your home, and then one if you have like 100 feet of distance, a second one in your yard that's freestanding. But I guess if people had a small sign saying this isn't allowed, that would be fine. But I guess the hesitancy from staff was the idea of allowing a new sign, and then every house along the beach road having like a big gaudy sign that's like, "Do not park here."
Or a little sign that just says
The name of the
why
rental
you can't
company.
park here.
Right.
That would be.
So if people want to do something small, I don't know if we'll
Right.
be overly enforcing.
People just run those over probably too.
Would it-
you know.
That's true.
Would it make, and this is more in the case of like a rental property, would it make sense to have kind of a schematic of the layout of the property? This is what's here. This is why you shouldn't go there. Just, and you can't, obviously, it's difficult to require this, but to make it available, we see a lot of alternate plans out there. Just even, where to put a trash can, something like that. There might be an opportunity to resolve some other issues. Why you cannot park on the on the trail, on the bike path. There might be some other things that could be done, heaped into this pile of informational stuff, go, no-go areas on property and on rights-of-way.
Yeah. Well, I'll say one thing about that from communicating with visitors a lot. You have to really strike the balance of not trying to say too much, because then they don't read anything.
Right.
You know what I mean? You have to, it's like overwhelming, and
That's why I say, very often in the public sector I hear educate, and that's a bar. Educate means that's a pass-fail.
Right.
All we can do is attempt to inform.
Right.
Yeah.
You could put signs that say sinkhole, quicksand.
Yeah.
Is any
So
other
anyway,
town done this, or
Life is a
this
pass-fail.
original to Nags?
However, there's also the
I
gray.
think it's original to us. In looking at, trying to find other localities that have a similar ordinance to kind of, think about their wording and definitions. I mean, I couldn't find that. I mean, I guess it was surprising to me given, sort of the prevalence of our septic health initiative and programs that we don't have definitions for septic tank disposal fields, septic
Right.
system area in our
Yeah.
code. So now we would.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it.
I think I like it too. I think there was, in your notes, there was mention of considering where it should apply.
Yes,
Which
so
I-
I had added that in, just to think about it, offering up, like maybe think of one of y'all's properties. If more often than not, we see this occurring on the beach road. Oceanfront homes, west side of the beach road. It occasionally happens west side, but the primary offenders are those along NC 12 or those homes that are in a rental program. So, as it's written, I'm gonna pick on Andy, as it's written, Andy would have to put a barrier up adjacent to his driveway, even though Andy's a full-time resident. He knows that's his septic
Yeah.
system, and he's never gonna park on it. This ordinance would require him to put a treatment there. So I didn't know if we wanted to talk about narrowing
That
this
that
down.
that is.
Yes.
I did think about that a little bit. It's
Well, but Andy wouldn't, because his home already exists,
Well,
right?
And he's got
Right.
a lot of teenage kids over at his house.
well, but Andy,
I mean, this is just for new construction right
well,
now, right?
but also, but it's also one of those things where, I do appreciate that, that, because people are gonna hit stuff no matter what. I mean, that's why body shops exist. That's gonna happen. But the question is, bad ideas are bad ideas. I don't want this to be a blight on certain sectors of the owned land, when really it's because of the flipping and repeated. So short-term rental markets, Airbnbs, reasonably speaking, that probably should fit into this category.
Well, yeah, that's the problem with the rental program thing, because,
We're never gonna be able
yeah.
Yeah, it's the moving,
fully track that. I mean, we can do the best we can.
Like, I think about my sister's house, like, she rents it. She's on the west side. She stays there a lot, but like, people could like drive right up on her septic tank, like,
Oh, people do.
yeah.
I don't know about at hers, but
Limited to one
they do it
area.
on the west side too.
I just wanted to bring it up.
Yeah.
I mean, it's much more simpler to have it apply town-wide and, trust that staff might use some common sense where we can.
Don't go after Andy.
But well, if he comes in with the zoning, I mean, as existing, he wouldn't have to do anything unless he came in
Right,
and had
right.
Unless you improved his house greatly, is that
Right,
what it
yeah,
says? Like,
exactly.
either you're new build or improving.
Correct.
I will say also, even if you're coming in and doing a ground floor enclosure with a bedroom, if that bedroom triggers another parking space, that's going to trigger, even if it's not substantial. If you're touching your driveway, if you're expanding your driveway, or having to add a parking space because you've added a bedroom, it's gonna trigger that as well.
But, we originally had it not adjacent to the driveway, and that would have been more applicable to a lot of people's systems, with these additions. But now it's only specific if you're, so if your septic's in the backyard and you come in and do
You're
a
fine.
ground, you're fine.
Right.
So we
And
felt
there's-
like it's
so there's-
targeted for people who are likely to park there, more targeted. I mean, that doesn't mean you couldn't pull around and do yard work
Going
and
back
and park on your septic
Yeah.
anyway, but
Well, and there's no room for, like, somebody using their good judgment about whether or not.
Good judgment is a hard, that is.
I don't mean homeowners, I mean
Common
staff.
sense is uncommon, right?
Yeah, I mean,
And- Except where Andy's involved.
okay, well,
I'm good with it.
I kind of feel like it has to be all residential properties, because otherwise we're gonna miss a lot of stuff.
Mhm.
I mean, that's just my opinion.
Well, some residential property then becomes rental on
Right.
change of ownership.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Everybody
Yeah.
agree, or what,
Can I make a motion
sure,
to approve it as submitted?
sure.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a
Somebody
second.
will second.
You got it.
Anybody else have anything to say? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Anybody against it? Okay, moving on then. Wait, where am I? Oh, Board of Commissioners actions. Thank you, Joe.
I don't think we have too much on here. So I did go ahead and highlight something that occurred on the consent agenda, which was the approval of a budget amendment, which with this approval of the budget amendment, we now have enough money to go ahead and contract with Low Wire Technologies to purchase and install the EVO charge, the level 2 EV chargers, and run the electric out to the parking lot area. So that budget amendment was a game changer. So everything is now in motion. Low Wire has actually applied for their electrical permit to start running the electrical over here at Town Hall, and they're in the process of purchasing the equipment. Joe's working with Public Works on the restriping for handicap accessibility and signage. So it's in motion.
Great.
Is that a 220 going out there, or is it different than that?
No.
sorry, what was the question?
Is that 220 that's going to be the voltage for that?
They're 40 amps, I thought it was 260, I'll have to look, I can send you the specifications, on it, but I know that we went with the 40 amp as opposed to the 32, which is a little
Speeds.
faster truck.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
And then we have the text amendment prohibiting drive-through restaurants. That was on consent agenda, so that's gonna be public hearing in March. There was a public hearing, for consideration of the Trade Center, which the planning board had seen as well. And the board approved that, with the associated, findings of fact. There was a public hearing, that we had on multifamily development, and I think everybody's aware of what happened with that. They passed a motion to table the item. to receive recommendations from staff with board input for a small task force working group, and recommended that a charge and schedule be provided at their March meeting as well. So, down in the discussion items on your agenda, we'll get to a space where we need to have a conversation about nominating someone from the planning board to serve on this task force.
When was the last time something like this happened?
Where something was pulled for a task force.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't know the answer to that. I feel like it's occurred when there was a moratorium on the large residential development. That was back in 2003, prior to me being here.
So it's been
There was
some
a task force for that.
some period of time.
You know, we've had like committees that have had charges of
Yeah.
certain things, but as far as a task force, I'm blanking. I would have to get back to you.
And how does a task force work?
Yeah.
Do they, how does their output flow?
I'm assuming that it would work very similarly to one of the board-appointed committees. There will be minutes taken and, you know, produced. There'll be updates provided, but beyond that, I don't know if Andy can provide anything additional on this, but
Would there be any involvement of this board in any of their produce?
so are you asking if following the task force, the recommendation would then come back through the planning board?
I guess, yeah.
I would certainly imagine so. I don't know that to be true, but I would imagine that if any significant change has occurred, it would have to come back through the planning board.
My concern about this is, you know, I actually wrote something down. I got so, you know, kind of, when the history of it is the density that was incurred, that was imagined by the proposition of multifamily caused the moratorium to take place. Once and I'll speak to myself here, I won't speak for the board, once I saw the amount of impact the existing code was going to have visually on unbuilt area before redevelopment, with the increased density that would be triggered by that, it made it very clear to me that this was serious. This was something that I was interested in. It would have an effect on issues that we were attempting to deal with, i.e. workforce housing. I thought that we had worked toward striking a concord where density was opposed to, or it was balanced by need or by good for the locale. My concern with this is that if we, as this has been, as the needle has jumped the groove, the experts in this situation are the property owners, all of them, the voters, the residents. These are the people that have made their concern clear. We were close to a concord. The Board of Commissioners has decided to change, has decided that they are not okay with that. This is something that I have experienced repeatedly, and we are tasked with a change. If there is a problem with the potential policy that we have agreed upon in this setting, we just get redirection and revisit it, and we work toward a confluence. I find this to be atypical, not and this is something that I cannot remember exactly until back when the larger houses were visited, which you could say also brought some of these problems to bear, workforce housing versus long-term or larger houses. So my concern is that, and my hope is that this group understand what, not only what they're being what the import of their decision to them, but also to the community, to the paintings behind you, Kelly. That is exactly what is in the balance.
I'll just follow up on that by saying that it is just critically important for the lines of communication to be strengthened and to be clarified so that we fully understand what brought this on and that we understand what the concerns are of the Board of Commissioners so that we can support that concern and still move forward with getting this done, because I'm not sure that just density is the issue. And so I would like to fully be aware,
Sure,
as a board member, speaking for myself as well as the board, that we have that communication that works and is very clear between the two of us, because up until that last board meeting on Wednesday, I thought we were all moving in the same direction.
Yeah.
Based on the guidance and everything we'd had
Did
from the
everyone,
workshops
would
and
everyone agree with
feedback.
that? We had a-
Well, not only that, I'll take that a step further. In the group workshop that we had, one of the situations that one of the nexuses we were faced with was, what's this going to look like? And it is my recollection that the mayor said townhouses.
I remember that too.
That was a clear, and once that was done, that's a very large piece of this. That's not what I heard in the minutes of the meeting the other day. That's not what I heard saw in that video. As well, we have had multiple meetings on this. There's public comment in every one. We have had public comment on these potential decisions that we're making. The majority of them have been in support of where we're moving. But industry has circumvented our process here and has moved on to the Board of Commissioners, knowing that was where the work will be finished. And as I understand that, I've taken an oath to be here. It's probably a very similar oath to that the Board of Commissioners have taken. I think we're working for the same people. The question is, can we keep working together if this is how this is going to proceed? And I understand that this is an exceptional case, first time in more than 20 years. But why should it be exceptional? I'm not sure, from my point of view, that we've reached the point of exception as of yet. And this is to your point, I don't see that the Board of Commissioners has said they don't like what we're doing until this. I can't vote for that.
Right, and I also was curious, just in this instance, this is a huge deal to our town, and I want it to be really well thought out, but I'm just curious why in this instance, they didn't tell us what they were thinking or what they wanted and send it back to us like they typically do. I'm just like really curious personally, like why just go all the way around us? Because we're open to listening and we would listen, and
Right.
I'm very curious about that.
I like
Kelly,
to think we do.
Yeah.
You know, I like
Kelly,
to think we do.
what was
If
the
there
number?
if there is something that's come up at the last minute
Mhm.
that the Board of Commissioners needs to say, oh, we need to put the brake on this, fine. But I think that should come right back to us and say, communicate that with us so that we can better understand what's changed, what's different, and how we can
Right.
work
There-
together forward with you.
There was a number that you came up with that said that if this were to, I believe it was something on the order of if the multifamily was as it had been, that if properties were developed that were available, it would something like 1,200 units could be yielded?
Yeah, I hadn't provided that in one lump sum, but as I was going through my presentation, I was equating, the property address with the acreage of uplands could yield X amount. And, I think someone on the board had kind of added it up as I was going through there.
That might have been
And it
Megan
was
who
in
added that up,
excess of
yeah.
1,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other Megan.
I think it sounds like I'm hearing that we, are concerned about our communication with the Board of Commissioners, and also communication with the public. I was at the Board of Commissioners meeting, are people not coming to let us know where they're feeling, other than if you're here with a text amendment? Do we need to look at that somehow, that people would engage staff and/or the planning board along the way, rather than waiting until, and then a lot of times we hear the same thing, oh, it's all too fast and too late, it's fast. Would any of us say that it's been fast, I mean, it's been months and
9
months,
months?
which I'm happy to put the time and effort in.
Yeah.
But we need to be sure that people understand that they can participate along the way, and that they should.
I look at the process that John DeLucia has been involved in.
Right.
He has been nudging us repeatedly.
Right.
That's exactly how I believe this is supposed to work.
Yeah, and he's got an official, amendment, a text amendment before us.
Sure.
So, but in this other situation, and I know, I actually served on that large structure committee all those many years ago, and I don't think it was way down the planning process. I don't think the planning board had spent months and months and months on it. I think that task force was formed pretty quickly in the process, just for whatever that's worth, I think. But, so it just seems if that was the route, it would have been good for it to be.
Well, I was involved in the commission for like the Dowdy Park area and recreation. That came up very quickly because of a market opportunity. And I remember standing behind the dais before I was involved in this and saying very clearly, if not now, when? If not here, where?
Right.
And we're stuck at those same things. If not now, when? If not here, where?
So we'll work on the lines of communication and, talk with our fellow board members on the BOC about that. And also, we need to be talking, moving forward on our agenda with appointments. Do we know how many people they want from the planning board? Not.
I think it was just
one.
kind of loosely one or two, but there was no.
So can I also, in here, I'm a little concerned that if it's one or two, that if there is an illness, that one or two won't be there, and that will be a missed opportunity. So I would say that it'd be, I think would make sense because of the involvement that we've had with this and the familiarity we have with the issues at hand, that if for any reason whomever from this group were brought forward, that those that aren't there, one could be there observing, and or two, backfill as needed.
Well, I think you can always observe, right? I mean, they're public meetings.
I'm assuming this is going to be open to the public as well,
Right.
but I.
Well, this is so there's a lot more. There's a lot that's not necessarily unknown as it is unclear.
So what you're saying is if we nominate one person, they can't be there for whatever reason at one time, then
So you want
you could
two.
you'd have an alternate
Well,
or two.
Not even an alternate. I'm
Or just-
saying any one of us should any one of us
Okay.
that is, with that we should there should be some kind of a call list.
That's probably pretty tricky because then you
I
haven't,
understand.
well, if you haven't been there all along, it's like being an alternate on a jury. You have to be there for everything
Okay, and
to participate, but
okay. Well, and if that's the way that you'd be comfortable, I'm glad to agree that alternate does make sense.
Well-
And I would say two at minimum, not
well, we can
two
put
people.
forth-
If I were asked how many people from this group should be on that group, I would say two at minimum.
So what are they
With
calling
alternates.
this committee?
I don't know that it has a name. It's a task force, I think,
And it's
technically.
for just the multi-family.
To look at the multifamily. So, I mean, well, let's keep going, and then we'll talk about when we get to on the agenda about appointments.
The only
Please.
other item that I had on here, actually two items. Megan Vaughn was appointed to another term on the
That's good.
planning board.
You're stuck with me.
And then town manager Andy Garman gave a presentation on the updated strategic plan. And the board was very appreciative of where we're at with our strategic plan at this point, and discussed the importance of, I guess, putting out there to the public how the items within our strategic plan are echoing what we heard from the citizens via the community survey. So there's going to be an effort to do more of that as well. And so as far as planning items go in terms of the strategic plan, it's pretty much the work plan that I presented last month.
Well, Kelly, let me ask you, the last time, I mean, since we're doing this survey, this community survey, I was wondering, what was it, in 2014? Is that the last time we updated the comprehensive plan?
2017.
Oh, 2017. Oh, okay. I thought it was a little bit older than that. Oh, I'm sorry.
No worries.
Kelly, there's something on here about Chad Moat saying about the flag system changing. Like, what is that?
Oh, I could talk
You
about
might know
that.
about that.
I can talk about that.
What's happening?
So the National Life Saving Group, which is the international partner to the United States Life Saving Association, which would be American Lifeguards, which is the membership of which we are all chartered as ocean rescue professionals. They have adopted a standard of flags, and the standard is basically it's a yellow to red to really red. And as it is right now, so our neighbors to the north, which I work with, red flags in that town it is not a prohibition, it's an advisory. In this town is a prohibition, and the prohibition, as I understand it, Andy, is if you enter the ocean, we're breaking the ordinance. Is that correct? Okay. And so what this would do is it would create, that would be bumped up to the double red flag standard. As it is now, double red flags are only used when we go into an evacuation mode. And that is a county declaration that is brought forward, and that is when the fire department will put 2 red flags up in front of their buildings. And that is considered a mandatory no swimming pass. So I believe where Chad has gone with this is, in coming it to bring a concord between the 1 flag is an advisory and the 2 flags will be a prohibition. I believe that's where he wants to go with it. I don't think that was pushed into code. I think they're going to take another shot.
So you're not
at it.
currently doing that?
Nope. Well, in
Nags Head?
You mean me?
In Nags Head.
In Nags
You're
Head,
in
no.
Code
No,
Office,
in
that's right.
Nags Head is not currently doing a double red flag standard. And the reality is nobody in this area is.
Right.
Nags Head and at least some other area organizations have their flags. We in a long time ago, we said we're never going to put up green flags because the ocean's never going to be safe to swim. Safe.
Right, yeah.
All caution should always be used. So with no flags, that means caution is encouraged. Yellow flags means caution is really encouraged, and maybe there are even spots you should stay away from. Talk to the lifeguards. 1 flag is a prohibition in this town. That's the way it's been since I worked here, which was when I first came to the area, and I worked for
So he's
Nags Head.
suggesting that we switch to the 2 flag.
2 flag situation, yeah. And what that would mean is a 1 flag would become, I believe, as he has outlined it, it would become what we do in Killable Hills.
Okay.
But the lifeguards are getting $19 an hour, which is really great.
Good.
Lifeguard's got a raise. Okay. Well, thank you.
Are you being facetious?
Kelly?
No, I got it. No.
That's it.
Is that good? That's it
Yeah.
for the BOC actions?
For BOC actions.
Ann for town updates. And, well, actually now we are quickly here on nominations to the task force. Quickly, and then we'll do the map, vegetation map. So I think probably the place we've discussed where this task force came from, probably the place to start is to see if who's interested in serving on the task force?
Do you know
Anybody?
if they meet in the mornings, or do they, I have to go to work at 12:30 now, I have a job now.
Oh.
Like, I actually have to be
I don't
somewhere.
think,
I actually have to be somewhere at 12:30.
I don't think there's any
Do they-
decisions about when they're
Well,
gonna meet, correct?
and
I mean, I
kind
can go
of
in
down
the
that
mornings,
road,
I can't do afternoon.
kind of down that road, I'm interested. However, my summer gig might stomp on this.
Right,
So I'd be glad to be on the list. If that means
Okay.
on the alternate list, that's fine.
okay, see
Because-
how it shakes
Yeah,
out on
Yeah, and
timing,
I
yeah.
promise, and I will take my Scout's honor to stay involved and informed.
And it would be helpful to, once they get a little further down the road, we'll know, because I think there was discussion about having a time frame too, setting a limit on how long this task force was gonna work. So it would be helpful to know that too, if it's gonna, what kind of commitment it's gonna be. 2, 4, 6, 8 months,
Yeah,
then it
right.
would matter.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you two are maybes, you
If
really don't know, it
If you can
depends.
figure out like
Okay.
what time.
Anybody
it
else
is.
interested?
I would be interested, and I have a flexible schedule. so-
Okay, that's great. Mead?
I am too.
Okay.
And
Alright,
I'm happy with those, with.
So shall we, if everybody's comfortable, shall we put Molly and Mead forward? Gary, what are you
Gary, what
thinking?
No, I'm good with that.
Okay, you sure?
Yeah.
Do you have an interest?
No.
You don't? Are you
He's
sure?
already on
Because
the
we can.
He's a second.
He's already overwhelmed with his,
I'm
okay. and then we'll-
happy,
So we'll put,
I'm happy with,
That's not overwhelming.
remembering.
we'll put those two names forward, and then, we'll, see how many they select.
Sure.
And then,
Okay.
I think that's the best thing to do, because we don't know how many they want. Is that okay?
Yes.
No one's listening to us. You got it, Kelly, right?
I am really interested.
Lily's listening, she's always listening.
I am really interested
Perfect.
in how how this will work, public record, will members of the public be allowed to be present, et cetera.
Okay, well, I'm sure we'll get updates.
Yeah.
Okay, so looking at, we got through that quickly. So now we will move on to presentation of the map delineating areas of protected vegetated buffers.
Vegetarian?
Vegetarian.
Vegetarian
Vegetable
development.
buffers. That's what you can put around the septics.
Lettuce.
Vegetable.
Let it go.
Just Molly.
Vegetation mapping.
Okay,
Joe.
you have a packet with all of the sort of major areas called out. Basically, for the last month, I've gone through pretty much all the record plats I could find in town that we at least had some idea where there would be vegetated buffers or landscaping buffers as a part of those recorded plats, as well as the VDOT plans. So you have that in your packet, and I created a web map application which delineates all those buffer zones. So like these were part of the,
Wow.
this is like in front of Nags Head Place. It's a 15-foot buffer. Zoom out and zoom further down to the hospital. There's, basically I drew them all in. So now they're all in one spot. This is part of the VDOT. These are part of the VDOT plannings. Or, I'm sorry, NCDOT.
It's okay.
What state are you in,
Some
Joe?
things, some habits
Virginia,
die
he's in
hard.
Virginia
It's
state
okay.
of mind.
I've only
It's
said
fine.
it 4
It's
million
fine.
times. So.
I
I'm
thought,
glad you're here.
doesn't Virginia have no waves? Just so you know.
I'm sorry, I really am.
You're fine. This is a tough crowd.
And then, here's the cause. So these are plannings that were required as part of record plat. But basically, I just wanted to show everyone
are.
that we've done that, and now it's, web map application that we can pull up and staff can open up at will to see where these are.
And so Gary, was one of the reasons why you've been asking about this for a
Well,
while to?
Well, one of the reasons, and I'm glad Joe has done this, this is beautiful. I mean, makes it clear, there's areas on this map that I have never seen before. Like on the causeway, I didn't know we had a protected area up by those residential houses on the, I guess on the, kind of on the west side.
Right,
Oh,
that sounds high.
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
the-
yeah,
yeah.
And this thing at
Closer.
at Eddie Goodrich's subdivision thing down there, that's in the village, I think. But no, it's a great map. I really
is.
appreciate, no, it's good. I was wondering though, can you zoom down to Deering Street and just take a quick see? I mean, Deering Street and then look at where the Sonic is before you get to Deering.
Just go the other way.
Yeah, the other way.
So Sonic,
That's the hospital coming up.
So there's Sonic right there.
Right.
Okay, well, I thought Sonic did have a requirement for, and I noticed that they've cut down a lot of the vegetation, but I'm just wondering, I mean, it used to be their sign was sticking up.
Out of the
So
vegetation.
as part
Out
of
of the
this, I did
vegetation.
not pull all the commercial site plans. I
Okay,
did the
okay.
residential site plans and the
Okay,
VDOT.
okay.
I did not pull every single commercial site plan.
And so Gary, I can speak to that a little bit. When I first started working here, they just scraped that dune. And they went under NOV to the extent that there were attorneys involved. Dunstan was the last name. He had to go write a check to town hall after a Board of Adjustment hearing. So their vegetation was based upon a significant berm and then a certain height of vegetation above it.
Right.
And they did eliminate a lot of that height, the original height. They went through a Board of Adjustment process, and so now you have me worried. I hope they've not removed more than what I was last aware of.
Well,
So.
you know where you're going.
But you're right, there was protected vegetation in that area that went them to a very hefty notice of violation many, many, many years ago.
How do I get to this?
So this is only internal to staff. It's not published for everybody.
So can I borrow your password?
You'll have to
Just
talk
go
to my
ahead and give it to
IT
us now.
administrator.
Why do you want to?
Well, okay,
You have the
example.
maps in front of you.
Yeah,
You know,
well,
just
an example is this, and this happened with trees. There were several live oaks that were just whacked down, and
So as I was doing, I mean, we did the residential ones and then the VDOT ones, like, every
NCDOT.
planning, NCDOT,
It's
every planning.
I'm there
that's-
for you, man.
After this
Make
meeting,
that.
I won't do it again.
you will, but it will be okay.
But, obviously there are plantings protected by ordinance and there are commercial plantings, I'm sure, that are also protected. So this doesn't encompass those.
Okay, so, and this is the Lorax speaking, I'm back in residence. If there is a if there is a right-of-way on the highway, what amount of, how much cutting can be done? In my concern in the situation that I'm aware of is, vehicles showed up on a either Friday late or Saturday early, and it was done by Monday, and more than one large live oak was whacked down, and this was not Dominion that did the work, and this was in violation of existing policy at that point, as far as I understand, just for the live oak standard. So could that be in this as well? Here's where, you can do this and this and this, but how much of, are there areas, actually this is probably better said, are there areas that where existing town code, it does not apply, i.e., you can hack down your vegetation, you can hack down your trees? Are there any areas of that sort in this? And what are the stipulations of it? It's a
So-
lot, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
My understanding of our ordinance as it exists with the live oaks is if you're building a new single-family residential home, you can cut it down if it's really in the way of that development. But if otherwise, you can't.
Right. So,
And so I don't think
but
there.
even then, if you do that, you should have to get the good grace of the town and the
You have
knowledge.
to
that's
anyway, to
correct,
build a
and
house.
I
mean,
I
they're
think
coming there and
there's a
looking at it
replanting
first.
provision, but I don't.
There is,
I mean, you have to clear,
to speak to
get a
that
permit to
instance,
clear.
it very much got into a he said, she said. We did contact the
Okay.
church.
Okay.
We spoke with them for months on end, and it really became, this is what we've been told here, this is what you're telling us. There was no documentation
Right.
of anything, so we really had a hard time
Okay.
pursuing it. But it was after that, we now do have
Cool.
a mechanism within the code for replanting or payment.
And that was really the impetus of me bringing that portion of the tree stuff together, you know, trying to think maybe we could bring it together. But the next question is this, just wondering, have, you know, rights of way, et cetera, the code on that, is that, can you shoot me that, Kelly? Just, I don't need to know it now, but just, as you think about it, just shoot me an email. I would be interested in how it goes.
And we don't think there's many situations where this is just, you know, an accident, and people don't know they're not supposed to be doing it? Or is there, you know,
Well,
an
okay.
education component that's worth considering to just kind of
There's
remind,
always an education.
remind people, you know, so
What-
that in, you know, the old ask for forgiveness instead of asking for permission or whatever, whereas if you put
Beg.
people on a little bit of a notice to say, you know, this is what's going on.
That situation that I'm referring to, that you're speaking of, Kelly, did they know that they were crossing a line?
We don't, you can ask.
I am not sure. Our code enforcement officer at Snyder worked with them pretty much daily,
Okay.
and got popped around to just regular staff, to parishioners,
Okay.
to everyone, and it honestly got to.
So it's
Yeah.
unclear, but it's
Yeah.
unclear. Yeah, got it. Okay, sorry about that.
Well, notice,
Okay.
I found this interesting. I found this one, and it's actually like its own Dare County parcel, this little buffer strip. And it's shown as like Nags Head Acres, but, you know. So there's one or two that are actually like, if you go to like the Dare County parcel, it has like, you know,
Huh.
a couple little buffer strips as like their own parcels.
Cool.
There's one over here too, I'd say.
And were you just
Yeah.
trying to get close to the
Yeah,
Sonic,
yeah, I
or were
would-
you actually wanting to look at deering?
Well, no,
You know,
I
just
wanted to see where they are. I mean, I think it's
Yeah.
good for all our planning board members to get a sense of,
Right,
these areas are protected, so to speak. I mean, vegetation-wise.
right.
So,
Right. So, I mean,
Is there a way, Joe, that if we wanted to go back and look where there would be a red circle or something that says this is an area that's protected or
so I've provided you the hard copy maps, which have every single piece of protected in those series of maps.
Okay.
And then with the VDOT plantings, that maintenance agreement was attached to the back of it. And the NCDOT plantings, it was attached at the back, the maintenance agreement, which was 3 years, and then it became the town's responsibility. But those aren't technically required to be maintained, they're the town's responsibility to be maintained, but, you know, that, there's no sort of legal requirement like
Right.
with the recorded plats.
Okay.
I will say, and I want to thank Andy, we have a wonderful new plotter over there in planning. So 2 things that we can do. One, I think if we take these maps and we can send them to you in their individual PDFs where you can blow them up and shrink them much better than you can as is. And then also, if you really want a huge town-wide map with these shown, we can try to get those to you. Just let us know.
Suitable for framing.
So our sharing privileges are really for internal or public, everybody.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure, like, you guys have Nags Head emails though, so I guess there's, you know, I don't know, but potentially there'd be some way we could give you guys viewer privileges so I could share this map with you all internally.
Yeah, I don't know.
Just a note from me on this, if you guys are looking at this, look at the oceanfront property lines. It's all over the place. There's a lot of property lines that are well out onto the beach,
Yeah,
which is, that's the gray of black and white. You
Right.
know, is there owned area on the beach? It's gray.
yeah. That's a whole nother issue.
Yes. There has been no eminent domain.
Well, thank you
for
for
the
this,
state of North Carolina.
for this mapping.
Yeah.
Vegetation mapping, not
Absolutely.
vegetable mapping.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Yes.
Joe, yeah.
Good work.
And- Okay. Planning and Development Director's Report. I'm betting, as usual, you've covered a lot of this, if not all of it.
Hang on one sec. There we go. Perfect. All right. Try to just hit on anything that's new. You don't need to know what you did at your last planning board meeting.
Maybe
So
I
we
did.
have had a couple Board of Adjustment meetings. I think I told you about the January 11th one. This was an appeal by Joe Searles. He was appealing the issuance of a building permit back at 4313 West Soundside Road. You can't see any of this. Hang on. 6914. Oh, you're good. There we go. So the Board of Adjustment upheld staff's decision to issue that development permit for the property there. Oh, no. There we go. And then the Board of Adjustment met again on February 8th to hear another appeal, which was submitted by Brian Harvey. We had issued him a notice of violation for utilizing a detached structure that he had on his property as an unpermitted second dwelling. The property was at 309 West Soundside Road. Eventually, the Board of Adjustment did agree to uphold staff's issuance of the notice of violation, but did circle back and talk about kind of what we've already discussed, which is we don't have great definitions of some of these things, and they do need some amendments just to make them more clear. So
That's kind of neat that that is reaching into definitions that, you know, which is, that's very evolutionary. I think it's good.
I mean, I don't know if you remember, but the definition of accessory structure and accessory use and customary and
dwelling.
incidental and for the
Oh, yeah.
convenience of the principal.
Subservient, yeah, absolutely.
All of
This is like
that
a preview of
came
coming
in.
attractions.
Yeah.
It is, so
I know.
when we get to the ADU, I know, then kind of all this is gonna have to be approached, so. The BOA
We do
did
it.
recommend that we do that, but we're already kind of working on it anyway.
Right.
Septic health, probably don't need to talk too much about that. Gary Ferguson came to his first meeting as the septic health liaison for the planning board. So we had updates on the data loggers that have been installed. We talked about this text amendment that you just heard, and talked about some ways that we're gonna try to get more information out there on the initiative. And Connor's gonna be the face of all of this work, so thank you, Connor.
Connor's gonna be busy.
He is, he's been incredibly busy. Estuarine shoreline management, so the town has had several meetings now with Coastal Federation, Dare County Soil and Water, and then we have a group of consultants that help us with our grants. And we're pretty much, we didn't get the Fish and Wildlife grant, but we've identified some other grants that we're going to go after. One thing that we're looking at is the Visitors Bureau is starting the permitting of their boardwalk on the Soundside event site, and looking at the possibility of partnering with them on doing a living shoreline along there where we can. Also met with Urban Bateman down at Sugar Creek. You know, the town has those properties, which I've always heard as Catfish Farm because of the history of it, but looking at possibly doing some type of living shoreline along Catfish Farm and then partnering with Urban along his restaurant areas there. So just trying to keep everything in motion.
Is that boardwalk permitted or all along the shoreline there?
So they've got the drawings together, and it's currently at CAMA
Oh, okay.
right now. And I think CAMA has some minor deviations that they want to see before issuing it, but I think it's been with DCM for several months now.
Okay.
They're trying to work it all out.
So it's going to be just in front of the event site?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, and it's not going any further south than the event site?
No, so there was a larger boardwalk project that the town has talked about in the past.
That's what I was wondering, if it was gonna connect up to that.
So right now, that project is still out there, but it has lost a little bit of momentum. I think there's more of an interest in filling out our multi-use paths and sidewalks along, Beach Road and 158 before we go back over to there. But I do think there is still interest.
Okay.
And when and if that happens, obviously, the Visitors Bureau Boardwalk would be a great connection there as well. And then talking about how that integrates with the Harvey site access and kiteboarding and all of that. So, already talked about EV. So sand relocation, when I wrote this down, it was just specific to what we had up to February 1st. But I got an update yesterday that we are, I think we are within $95,000 of maxing out our allocated money for the cost share program. So it's being utilized heavily, and people are very appreciative of it. That's another thing that Connor mans up all the sand relocation applications. So after this, he'll probably be trampling some dunes and talking to contractors.
Awesome.
And then Dowdy Park events, we had a winter market on January 13th. That's a Saturday from 9 to noon, just a handful of vendors, but had over 100 visitors and people really seem to enjoy it. We have, let's see when our next one, we had one February 10th, and I don't have our March date in here. But I believe it's the second Saturday. So those have been going really well. Paige Griffin, the event coordinator, has been busy getting the 2024 happenings together, and I believe she basically has all the bands for our summer concert series already lined up and under contract. So,
Right.
And yeah, the Art and Culture Committee will be giving a presentation to the Board of Commissioners in March. That'll be highlighting what we did last season and what we're hoping for the upcoming season in terms of budget. And that's it.
Okay,
That's all I have.
thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody have questions for Kelly on her director's report? Okay, moving on then to members' agenda. Anybody, anything that we haven't already discussed?
I've already ground my axe.
Okay, good, we appreciate that. Anybody else? No? And I have nothing on my chairman's agenda, so I will entertain a motion to
Can I make a
adjourn.
motion to adjourn?
Please, thank you. We are adjourned.